but you can't have food safety culture, positive food safety culture, if you don't have competent managers.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Highfield Food Safety broadcast on Food Safety Day. And I'm very happy to be joined by Richard Sprenger, one of the leading experts in food safety, and myself, I'm Sterling Crew. So Richard, it's Food Safety Day. We all know that every day is Food Safety Day in effect for those who work in the sector, but it's a great way of reminding ourselves how important food safety is. There are over 200 diseases that can cause food safety issues, ranging from diarrhea to cancer. So we know how important it is. And 1.6 million people go down with a food safety illness, not every year, not every month, not every week, every day around the globe. 1.6 million people go down with a food safety problem. And we know the economic impacts as well, as food safety costs the economic climate for the world $110 billion, an extraordinary sum, isn't it? What could be done with that money if we had food safety under total control? So Richard, you've been doing this now for well over 40 years. It's in your blood. Congratulations on your recent award from the King, well deserved. So if I said to you, Richard, what's the theme around Food Safety Day? It is science in action, but what do you think is the most important thing when it comes down to food safety?
Thanks for that, Sterling. And I think the main issue is we need to ensure the competency of managers in food safety. We don't focus on competency. We focus on HACCP, we focus on food safety culture, we focus on standards, we focus on legislation, we focus on training. But we don't focus on the competency of management. And none of those things work as effectively if the managers responsible aren't competent. And the other thing, it's interesting you mentioned that the levels of food poisoning, foodborne illness, especially in those countries where there are accurate statistics recorded, why is it that the figures aren't going down? Because I'm sure from your point of view, you go around food businesses and standards are improving significantly. I know what standards were like 50 years ago. And I saw, as an enforcement officer, I'm sure you did, a significant improvement on average amongst the majority of premises. There's always exceptions of criminal-minded organisations, but if you take those out, those people, which are the vast majority, are committed to high standards of food safety. We've improved significantly. Our knowledge has improved significantly, but food poisoning statistics, whether you take the USA, whether you take the UK, New Zealand, Australia, all these countries, we aren't making an impression on those statistics. Now, perhaps, are we assuming that those statistics relate, the ones you quoted from the World Health Organization particularly, relate to food poisoning from commercial food businesses, or are there lots of other things in there that are not directly related to commercial food businesses, such as polluted water sources? I'm sure that causes more foodborne disease in certain underdeveloped countries than food poisoning from commercial premises. So there's a lot of things we need to look at, but certainly we need to look at those things that we are applying, the various things I've discussed, as to how we can ensure that we get the best out of the HACCP system. How do we get the best out of training? How can we improve what we're doing to make a difference?
That resonates with me as well, Richard. This is food safety science in action, and certainly we've seen some great science helping food safety on analysis, or knowing how how food safety actually works at a chemical and a microbiological level. So you're right, our understanding has never been greater. And I agree with you. I think our standards, if I'm talking about the UK, are a lot higher, certainly than I've seen over the last 40 years. They've definitely improved. And there's a lot of people doing a lot of work globally to improve food safety, but we're still not getting into those figures. So are you saying, hey, look, the science is supporting us and the technology that comes out of that is supporting us, but so you're saying there's a human factor in this? Do you think we're not making progress on people, on training, on education, on motivation?
Yeah, I don't think we've got our priorities right. As I've said, it becomes fashionable to spend a lot of time on food safety culture, and everybody thinks food safety culture is the answer. And I'm a big fan of food safety culture, don't get me wrong. But you can't have food safety culture, positive food safety culture, if you don't have competent managers. You can't have legal compliance if you don't have competent managers. You can't have an effective HACCP system if you don't have competent managers. So what do we do to make sure our management are competent with regard to food safety? You tell me why nearly every country emphasizes the importance of training food handlers, and I don't think there's one specifically that mandates the higher level of training required for managers. Indirectly, you could argue that in the UK that legislation does, but I can assure you there's a lot more effort put into training food handlers because people think if you train food handlers, that'll solve the problem, and it doesn't. We haven't got training being delivered as it should be, and that's a major factor. And I think that's symptomatic in the other areas as well. We've got to start really concentrating on management. You know, when you look at risk factors with food poisoning outbreaks, they're the best statistics to use. When you're looking at hygiene related to commercial businesses, don't look at overall number of cases, which are poorly investigated and difficult to find out root causes. Look at outbreaks. And when we look at outbreaks, nearly everywhere, you'll see a list of 10 or 20 things that are actually listed as being responsible, the root causes of the outbreaks, the risk factors, whether that be temperature abuse or whether it be poor personal hygiene or whatever. You tell me one list that includes management failure, and that is the root cause of most food poisoning outbreaks. When you trace it back, you keep asking why, and it eventually gets to a situation that a manager didn't do something about it.
Absolutely, Richard. And we can see that in coroner's reports of where people have died. And you say food poison incident investigations, prosecutions. We see a lot of prosecutions. And when you actually think, well, how did that happen? It comes down to people and people not knowing what to do or not doing what they're supposed to do. I see that, Richard, when I go into premises and someone doesn't wash their hands and I say, excuse me, you haven't washed your hands. But they all know they should do it. So no one's ever said to me, oh, I didn't know I had to wash my hands. Never someone said that. They always come up with some other excuse. They had other things to do, or they forgot. But they've all been trained. I haven't come across people who haven't been trained, but they still don't do the most basic of food safety thing you can do, which is wash your hands before you come into the to start handling food. So why is that? If they've been trained, why aren't they doing it?
Because the managers aren't ensuring that they do it. Our training, most of our training, and I'm not talking about where the training is done entirely internally, but particularly external training, you go into a classroom, and this can be e-learning as well. It doesn't matter. It's not just traditional classroom training. You attend a course, you get your certificate, you put the certificate on the wall, but what training companies, what e-learning actually then looks at what happens when the person goes back into the business to implement what they've done. Now, a good trainer, which is one of the advantages of training over e-learning, is that you can motivate the people to implement. But you're doing it in a classroom. When they go back to the work, if their manager says, you haven't got time to do that, or I don't care what you've been told, this is how we do it in this business, then nobody's going to implement it. And that's the problem. We need to focus not just on training. Training is the beginning. We need to focus on what people do when they get back into the business. Is there somebody there that is effectively guiding them? Is there somebody supervising them, instructing them, making sure that they're continuing? It becomes a way of life. And if a manager sees somebody doing something that is wrong, then does he give them on-the-job instruction, guidance, or does he ignore it because there isn't time? Because as you said, when somebody says, well, I haven't really got time to wash my hands, it's also by implication means that a manager has accepted that.
Do you think then, Richard, about continuous professional development, continuous training?
Yeah.
Sometimes people are very, very proud of the training I've had, but then when I talk to them about it, it was like 10 years ago, and
Yeah.
so much changes in 10 years, and you need to refresh yourself, I think, all the time to be aware of what you need to do. What do you think about that continuous training? Is it a lifelong experience, or can you get away with doing it once and then embedding it into someone?
From a food handler, where do they get their CPD? Well, a food handler, generally speaking, will get their CPD, continuous training, advice, guidance, from the manager. So once again, that's in practice. What we've got to look at is how do we ensure that managers who are trained, they're the ones that we've got to concentrate on for CPD, and then get them to make sure the staff are continually, they can filter out what the staff need, so they get continuously trained on the job. And so we've got to look at how can we provide effective CPD for managers. Now, 30 years ago, where did you get your CPD from? You'd go to maybe you'd go to conferences. We didn't have the internet as such, and certainly didn't have the facilities now. So you'd go to conferences, you'd talk to people, you'd read books, you'd maybe look at research papers. Quite often it was time consuming and expensive because most of us got CPD. I'm sure you did in your early career by attending conferences or even eventually giving talks at conferences and getting more CPD. Nowadays, it's so easy to get CPD. It's so easy and cost-free. How many webinars do we provide? Whereas before, you'd have to travel, it would cost you a lot of time and a lot of money. Now we provide free webinars, very good webinars. We've got the Highfield Food Safety Forum. That is probably one of the best global sources of information free of charge that people can use. Now, that's how we get the CPD. Much more important than refresher training, where you say, oh, we're going to sit the same course every year. You can't wait a year. People forget within a week 90% of what they learned. So you've got to keep it in front of them, the message, keep on top of it. And that's what we've got to do with CPD. We can use the internet, we can get that information, and then we can keep on top of the job. We can find it. We can learn from other mistakes from other countries, because did you know the big E. coli outbreak at Wishaw in I think it was 96. 21 people died, as you know. Major event. I found out from a webinar I attended a couple of weeks ago that year there were 2 major outbreaks, even larger than that, in Japan involving E. coli. I didn't know about that. Nowadays, we have a major outbreak like that. It's all over the internet. You know that you can then think, oh, there was a butcher at Wishaw. There was major E. coli outbreak, mainly because of cross-contamination. There was a big inquiry, obviously, providing all that information. We can disseminate that now to everybody, and every butcher has no excuse for not learning about what the problems were and then implementing good practice within their business. And whether the outbreak takes place in America or Australia or anywhere, we can draw from that information and put it onto forums like the Highfield Food Safety Forum. The biggest problem we've got is there's so much information, we don't know what's accurate and what is inaccurate. And that is one of the problems in training as well. We are getting so many influencers that are providing wrong information and inappropriate information that people on the internet, if they're a good influencer, they will accept over somebody who's been involved with that subject, is an acknowledged expert in that subject, but the weight of what they are saying is equal. That didn't used to happen 50 years ago, but it does now.
I think there's some very wise words there, Richard. I think you're right about using trusted sources, whether you're doing your own training or using a trainer. You want to get somebody that is competent there. I think your comment about management is very important. So much focus is on the food handlers, but sometimes people forget it's the managers who are supporting them and educating them and checking their work. They need to know what they're doing as well. And the fact that training is a lifelong thing, that we have to keep up to date on it straight throughout our whole careers. Richard, an expert in training, but things go wrong and training goes wrong. So why does training go wrong?
Training is going wrong in my view because we aren't ensuring that it's implemented. We're concentrating on training in the classroom or e-learning, but that's one of the reasons it's not being implemented effectively. Training is seen as, or the objective is to get a certificate, to satisfy a customer, or to satisfy an enforcement officer. So if you take the UK, for instance, where it's a legal requirement for trainers for food handlers to be trained commensurate with their work activities, many enforcement officers will accept a certificate as complying with that. Do you think that's right? That if you've got a certificate, you comply with the law, or does the law require you as a food handler to be competent?
You know, I think the trouble with the law is so vague in some ways. It's not prescriptive enough. It just leaves it to the business to decide what training is appropriate. And perhaps we could do some more work on being very clear what type of businesses at what type of level need what type of training. So, Richard, let me just ask you a question then. If you had a magic wand and you could change one thing in training globally, what would that be?
Training managers to a higher level of food safety, all managers and all supervisors, making it mandatory that they attend what we would call at minimum a level 3 food safety course and a level 3 HACCP course as well. That's one thing I would change and mandate that instead of just saying and emphasizing the need for training food handlers. And I would also make it mandatory for them to undertake CPD, continuing professional development, that was relevant to their job.
Richard, science in action to you. What's the 3 big things I think science has done for food safety?
I think it's the basis of everything we do. I think science is the basis of HACCP, which is fantastic, and for all food businesses. I think science is the basis of legislation, and it should be. Some legislation isn't science-based and it falls down when it's not, in terms of not achieving its objectives. So, yeah, science is behind everything, and we need to be able to now use science, which we can do by using AI as long as we trust it. So all of us can access scientific information to inform our decisions more effectively. The key is making sure that the science that you're using is from a reputable source.
Absolutely, and it's evidence-based as well.
Yes,
With
exactly.
is used. And I suppose it's the translation of science also into technology. And it's the technology which we use for food safety, isn't it? It's transferring that knowledge into something that's very practical.
Yes.
Perhaps for me, the biggest scientific breakthrough, Richard, has been our understanding of the microbiome of the gut. You know, food poisoning starts in the gut, and now we know much, much more about how our GI system works, and that's being applied now to improve people's health. And the other one for me, I think it's a science of analytics, how that has progressed so much. Now, we now know what's in our food. It's quicker, easier to find out whether it's a microbiological problem, or maybe it's a chemical problem, or there's dirt in there. And I think that's fascinating. When I was a student, you used to have a big room that had a piece of equipment in it, and you need PhDs to operate it. Now, I think analytics, it's moved on to, you know, something you can use in your hand to actually find out what's in your food. And it's very, very cheap, less than £400. And you don't have to be a PhD to understand it. Just normal people can operate it. And I think that's what science is giving us. It's giving us a greater understanding of what's in our food, and then how we control it.
But
Any final?
Yeah, the interesting thing, taking the gut biome, that translates to what people should eat, when they should eat it, and all sorts of things are coming out now relating to the science of gut biome. The problem is there's a lot of experts out there on AI saying completely contradictory information as a result of interpreting that scientific information. And what I'd like to see is a trusted source actually providing the research papers available, so that when you, if you're interested in something like that, you can make a more informed choice because you've got the scientific research papers that you could refer to, especially if they're easily understood. And we can apply that to the whole of food safety. We need a source of truth, if you like, that we can go to the science, look at the counter arguments from experts, and they will be entirely different, and then look at them and make an informed choice. Because without that, we just get told science says this, and you come up with an answer, but another country will say science is this, and it comes up with a different answer.
I would disagree with you. I think science is science, it's facts is fact, and you can't interpret facts. They are what they are. And I would caution anyone using AI to get scientific information. A lot of people are misusing AI, and AI is only good as what goes in there. And I think we've all discovered recently some of it is just not up to the science.
Yeah,
so Richard, thank you very much.
Yeah. Hang on, 100% agree. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that AI be used to source the original scientific research that came up with the decision. That's what I'm saying. So we can go back, instead of getting an interpretation from AI, which is what we're getting at the moment, and a lot of it is misinformation, we need to be able to look at the research, the science, who said it originally, and we can go back and look at the research.
I think the way to do that is there are learned journals that are trusted and they're readily accessible online. And I used to be president of the Institute of Food Science and Technology, which has a trusted source signposting to all the research papers. So I think as long as you're going to the trusted source, you'll never have a problem. Start using online and AI, well, then you're getting into a bit of a minefield. But I think trusted sources are always the best place to start.
Okay.
Thank you for your insight into science, Richard.
Thank you.
So, Richard, thank you very much for your insights into training. Just a reminder to everybody, Richard did mention the Highfield site on LinkedIn, the Food Safety Forum. And if you go onto Highfield as well, there's a whole battery, a whole library now of webinars and bite sizes that you can access for free that might help you with your training. So Richard, thank you very much and have a very happy Food Safety Day.
Thank you. Thank you, Sterling.